And certainly within the UK, definitely I think that system is there. As I say, my role has been respected across the system. I get high level attendance coming into and working through the various elements that we do. And of course I've described my board. My board is a one-off meeting. It's all the work that's going on in the background between the people within Border Security Command and the people in all those other departments that I think has been delivering. That will be enhanced when the various measures from the bill are achieve royal assent, and I have to say it has been enhanced significantly through the processes that particularly the PM stocktakes have been driving action and from various parts of the system. One of the other points where it's is a challenge is obviously much of the work that we need to do to deliver is being delivered internationally. So what has been really critical from my perspective is that ability to engage very effectively with other countries, and particularly those countries that are especially relevant in this work. Now, in that regard, what's become really apparent to me is achieving movement with the other countries needs very much that political leadership and the political drive, which I've seen repeatedly with both the current and the former Home Secretary and with the Prime Minister. You know, when my job was being announced, I was with the Prime Minister in Italy, talking to a range of partners within Italy, and there's been very clear signalling to international partners the role that I have and the convening role and the significance of the role that I have, and then obviously working at an official level as well, that I've been able to establish really strong relationships with the key countries, and a lot of that often has been on the back of actually first visiting those countries with either the Home Secretary or a Minister or indeed the Prime Minister, because I think getting that level of credibility into the other systems. The other international point that I think has been really key, and you know, in answer to your what's happened in the first year, in March the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister was present, but the Home Secretary ultimately hosted an international summit at Lancaster House, which was a border security summit with a real particular focus on organised immigration crime, and we had 50 odd countries attended that meeting, where there was, the first day was a ministerial meeting, so the Home Secretary chairing with her counterparts in those other countries and looking at how we can work collectively together there. And then the second day was a very law enforcement focused day, which was chaired jointly by myself and Graham Bigger, the Director General for the National Crime Agency, with our contemporaries from all of those countries. And that included, that was a worldwide, it was not simply European countries, it was worldwide. So that I think was really key in ensuring that is worked. And for example, yesterday, again in Lancaster House, I was in Lancaster House yesterday, where the Home Secretary was chairing the meeting of the Balkan countries, the Berlin process, which had started back in 2014, and we were there yesterday with the interior ministers from all the Balkan countries. The Balkans is one of the key routes of movement for the migrants to come through, and it's really important that we're working closely. And that meeting yesterday with the ministers, which also covered other organised crime aspects later on in the day, but we had a big session in the morning around organised immigration crime. And what I was feeding into that meeting was the fact that the week before, as part of the Berlin process, I had been in Sarajevo for 2 days, where for the first day I was meeting a range of partners, up to and including the minister from Bosnia-Herzegovina, and then a week ago today, I was hosting a meeting of all the border police chiefs from the 6 Balkan countries, jointly hosted by the International Office for Migration, and also with Frontex there, to bring together and ensure that we're working as effectively as we can with all of those.
Thank you. Final question for me is just, this is great to hear all of these meetings taking place, but the reality of it is what we want to see is outcomes that are delivered on the ground, which don't seem to be being achieved. So the simple question is what, we're over a year into this government.
Yep.
Why are those outcomes not being simply achieved in terms of reducing the number of illegal immigrants coming across the Channel, based on all of these meetings that you've been having?
Yeah, and I think it's, it's not just about the meetings, it's about getting all of that work. What this organised criminality has been developing for 6 or so years, it has become and has continued to become more sophisticated. The criminality is very well established from source countries and organising countries right the way through the various transit countries into the UK. The approach that we are taking and we've started taking since Border Security Command is about bringing together the range of attacks that we need to make across all the different elements to suppress and to ultimately undermine that criminal business model. Now, that isn't going to happen very quickly. I think there has previously been kind of views that there is one thing or one or two things that will provide the answer. I very firmly believe that that's not the case. This is an established criminality. It's an incredibly profitable criminality, and there are increasingly numbers of people who are in a situation where they could see the potential to become migrants. So I don't think this was ever going to happen very quickly. Since establishing the command and bringing together much greater, closer working between not only all of our assets within the UK, but also all of that work that is going on internationally to ensure that at every stage of the route there is intervention to prevent the smugglers doing what they need to do. That work is definitely in development. I think we are starting to see some of the impact of what we are doing in the ways that the smugglers have shifted the methods of what they're doing at the moment. I think that is pointing to some of the interventions where we are making that more challenging in that respect. But this was always going to take time. I'm sure we'll come on and talk about the funding that's been made available to me within the Border Security Command. And that has been very much about the vast majority of that funding going into places where we are going to have operational delivery and operational impact. But quite clearly, that takes time to work its way through to turn into being people that are operating in the way that we want them to operate. So, as you would entirely imagine, I more than anybody find the fact that the numbers are where they are frustrating and really challenging, and this issue could not be more high profile. But I am convinced that the plan, the sort of cross-spectrum plan that we have in place is a plan that will deliver, but we need to keep pushing and delivering that plan. We need to keep putting the funding into those areas of the plan that are going to make the maximum impact, and then we've got to keep pushing with it.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thanks both for coming in today. Just one follow-up question on that for me. So, it's good to hear about having an integrated plan and full spectrum and a board. And it's good to hear that people across government are talking to each other about this, although I do imagine that did happen already. So I suppose my question is, what about the Border Security Command is actually new? What is happening now that wasn't happening before?
So, I can give a number of examples. So, well, first off, I know as you characterise, bringing everybody together, but that did not happen. And as you say, there may well have been other conversations going on between different departments, but that I don't think was happening in any sort of structured way.
Who wasn't talking to who before?
Sorry?
Who wasn't talking to who before?
I'm absolutely sure that different departments were talking to one another. I think it's whether conversations and action that you then take is very focused to a very clear purpose and a very clear outcome that you are seeking to achieve. So that, I think, is a key point, and bringing all of those people together was and has shifted the situation in a way that did not happen before, and that work feeds obviously then into the very cross-government level of oversight that's there, obviously from the Home Secretary within the Home Office, but from the Prime Minister as well. The point that I made briefly at the outset, one of the first things that I did when I came into the job, was that I needed a properly integrated intelligence picture of how we see the threat manifest itself. And whilst there were various intelligence products that looked at elements within organised immigration crime, they were happening in different places. They were not necessarily all coming together. So bringing that group together in a way that allowed us then to produce in the first instance the sort of comprehensive picture of what the threat looked like, and then on the basis of what that threat looked like, that was in terms of what do we know about the organisers, what do we know about the countries that the migrants are coming from, what do we know about what is happening in the transit countries going through. That then informed the creation of the integrated plan, so that we were able to identify, or I was able to identify, where we needed to focus our attention and how we needed to do that. So all of those things were not things that had happened prior to the creation of the Border Security Command. The fact that then there was an amount of funding that was immediately put into the Border Security Command, and then after I had arrived, that funding was increased for the sort of 24-25 year, and then subsequent to that, within the current year, there's been an additional 100 million from the HMT have provided from the reserve to allow us even further to accelerate some of the work that we are putting into place. So I think all of that is a change, and of course one of the other elements that will come out of the command is that, and certainly once the Act has received royal assent, I will then be accountable to Parliament in terms of the plan that we have and the priorities that I set, and then I will report back to Parliament on how effectively those priorities are being delivered.
Perhaps,
yes, of course.
Chair, just add my perspective in terms of what the BSC has brought to this. So, of course, people were speaking, just like they were speaking about terrorism before OSCT was created, but this is a recognition that you've got a chronic threat which Whitehall is engaged and working on. As a result of that and the ministerial interest, you will know that you get lots of units which are created, you get lots of people and complex structures that come together. For me, this is a simplification and rationalisation which allows us to focus entirely on delivering operational effect, whilst the development of the 4P plan across Whitehall, we've got the level of engagement and a focal point in the Home Office to deliver that, very simply. So for me, since this began in 2018, there has been more and more teams layered onto existing structures. This is a moment with the legislation which codifies everything, brings it together in one place, and allows the operational element to focus on that, whilst the policy issues and the rest of the planning is done in one place.
We received a letter overnight which talked about
Yes.
structural changes. How is that going to affect you? How's it going to make you more effective? Or?
Yes, and I apologise for the fact that the letter arrived so late through various clearance issues. But I was really keen that you did receive the letter before I came and spoke to you today, because as you rightly point out, it does have a shift in terms of resources. As I say, when I started the role, it was then how do we take this challenge on, and working through, and as I said, I started with the intelligence picture. We then produced the plan, and I was I was very clear at the outset that what I wasn't prepared to do was walk into a new role and say we need to take that bit from there, that bit from there, that bit from there, to create very much in terms of that. How do we bring the system together? How do I convene the system? Inevitably and understandably, as the year has progressed and as we've seen how things have moved forward, how the plan has developed, there have been obvious parts of, certainly within the Home Office, parts of the system where I've been working very, very closely with for the obvious reasons. And there's been a natural process of evolving. It really is important to be very clear that, you know, on the day before the election in 2024, there was no such thing as the Border Security Command. And then after the election, this thing came into being. So we are still in a very early stage of developing, and I think it's entirely reasonable that as that's gone through, we would identify ways that we would seek to look at it. Very much in line with both of the questions that have already received. The Permanent Secretary instigated a review on basically answering, in essence, the sort of question, well, this BSC thing is here now. Has it got the power? Has it got the capability to deliver what it's there to deliver? And that review was undertaken. And one of the, with all parties being party to feeding into the review and the conclusions of the review. And one of the elements that came out of that was that clearly there are some parts of the system where it is very, very integrally linked into the sort of day-to-day working of what BSC delivers. But in the current configuration, you've got a lack of clarity around line management and kind of leadership, if you like. So there are two parts of the Home Office that we will be migrating across to come under my line management. The first, and I guess fairly obviously, is the elements within Border Force that are the small boats, operational command, the people that are dealing on a day-to-day basis with the activities in the Channel. And the second element is Home Office intelligence. So Home Office intelligence is a pretty significant entity that looks across all of the requirements that the Home Office has for producing intelligence activity and assessment, and have people who work not only in the UK but also work overseas. So we are going to move those two elements across to come in under the BSC line management to go alongside the fairly small existing command that we've put together thus far.
How often does your board meet?
So it's either 4 or 5 weekly, essentially. So it's you aspire to a month, but often it will, for various reasons, it will shift. But generally speaking, every 4 or 5 weeks we will bring the senior leadership board together.
How regularly are you getting data and metrics about what's going on the Channel?
Every day. As you might imagine, my phone pings 4 times every day to tell me precisely what activity is in the water on both the UK and the French territorial waters. What I also have, apart from the internal Border Security Command governance arrangements that I don't imagine you're particularly focused on, but once every Wednesday I chair a small boats operational meeting on a Wednesday afternoon, and that meeting brings together all of the elements within the Home Office that have a direct responsibility in relation to this. So obviously my people, National Crime Agency, the Small Boats Operational Command people, Home Office Intelligence people. I also then have our staff from Post in France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany and the European Union, because the sort of so-called Calais group and the near neighbours group is absolutely significant because to understand the work that's going on in those countries. So that meeting is convened every week. One of the products that I have for that meeting is a a common intelligence picture product, which you would be, I'm sure, familiar with. So I will have that CRIP, which will be, if you like, the core product that we are discussing at that meeting, and that will have covered the previous week up to the Monday. So I will start off then and talk about immediately what's been going on since Monday, if there's something happening. But then we will work through that common picture. That common picture is then what we will discuss, and there will be further inputs put in to that product, and that product will be finalised later in the day on the Wednesday. And then on the Thursday, that product is then shared very broadly across all of the parts of government that are required to that are involved in the work that we do, and obviously upwards politically, to give that picture with a covering note from me that picks out and highlights any particular issues that we think are relevant.
And so ministers see that?
They do, yes.
Are ministers involved in any of the meetings?
They're not in my board meeting. I have a very regular meeting with the Borders Minister, so now Minister Norris. So I meet with Minister Norris very regularly. Again, theoretically weekly, but sometimes week or week and a half. There is, and there's been some, obviously, with the change of ministerial team that we've had just recently, and there's been lots of other stuff going on. So that will be settled into a regular, and I have had a regular border security meeting with the Home Secretary on a weekly basis to talk through where we are in relation to that. And then, as I've alluded to a number of times thus far, the Prime Minister chairs an irregular migration stocktake meeting, and they have been happening more or less kind of monthly. It depends. There are different elements of the irregular migration, and sometimes he will chair those for other elements rather than the small boats element.
I'm glad you talked about accountability to Parliament, because this committee is clearly very interested in this, and I think it would be very helpful if we could have sight of some of the data regarding progress or not, but yes, an understanding of what's happening on a regular basis for this committee.
We can certainly take that away and come back with a proposal for that.
Thank you. Paul Kohler.
Very briefly, I'm glad the review's taken place. According to Guido Fawkes, it's very recent that review's taken place.
It is.
Can the committee have sight of that review if needs be on a confidential basis?
I can't see any reason why we wouldn't be able to do that, but I will take that back and ask that question. I think that should be fine.
Thank you. Margaret Mullane.
Good morning. On a background of in 2025, we had the most small boat crossings from January to September.
Yes.
I hear what you said to Robbie earlier about it's not going to happen overnight, it's not going to happen quickly. I think people listening to this will be very frustrated when they hear this. So my question really is, the number of small boats and the people actually in the boats is going up. And for me, I'd like to know what you think the main challenges are in preventing the boats coming from France.
Yes, okay. And can I just say I absolutely share the frustration and the concern that the numbers are going up. So a range of things that I think it's worth probably talking about. I've alluded to, and you've mentioned it again there, what we are seeing here is a real shift in terms of the tactics that the smugglers are undertaking. We have seen that sort of shift over time, but there's a couple of things that I would kind of point to. What we've seen certainly in the 12 months that I've been in this role, we've seen quite a shift in the primary nationalities of the people that are coming over as the migrants. We have seen a much higher number of migrants coming from sub-Saharan Africa. So Eritreans are kind of top of the list. Eritreans, Ethiopians, Sudanese, Somali migrants are being trafficked over, and I think that's had a number of impacts. One of the first impacts, and this was particularly prevalent towards the tail end in autumn into winter last year, where we had the horrific period where the number of fatalities rose quite significantly. And some of that was about that, in a sense, I think for a period, the smugglers lost a bit of control of the process they were running. And what was happening was, particularly with the Eritrean, Ethiopian migrants, they were storming boats and getting onto boats even when they hadn't paid, and that was what was making the boats overcrowded. You were getting people, a lot of the people that died, drowned and crushed on those boats. So that was happening. We then, I think, and Rob may well be able to come in and give a bit more detail, but we then saw, I think, an exercise where the smugglers started to take back control around the crossings. And so that phenomenon has died down, but what they've also done is wanting to get more and more people onto these boats. I think some of that does point to, and I'm sure Rob will talk through the kind of the law enforcement elements that we have really focused on. One of those elements has been the supply of the equipment, and if choking the supply of the equipment to make it harder for them to be in a position where what they are attempting to do is, when they know it's a day where it is possible to cross, they need to get the right equipment and the migrants at exactly the right place at the right time to allow them to launch. So I think what we've seen there, but what is also, and you will have no doubt seen it in the media, is the shift to this taxi boat methodology. So previously what we saw was the boat would be loaded up with the people, it would attempt to launch from the beach. What we're now seeing, because of the numbers that are on the boats, and the average number this year has been 61, but we've all seen examples, and many of those have been in the media, where that's been considerably higher. It's impossible to launch that boat on the beach, so they've created this taxi boat concept where the migrants will wade into the water, the taxi boats will come along, and the migrants will then. And what we've ended up there is, obviously, with some of the numbers, and I think the highest we've had latterly is 125, which is extraordinary and incredibly dangerous for those migrants. So all of that is. So I think it's worth Rob talking about the various elements
just before Rob comes in. It's kind of with organised crime, though. We've had presentations before, and they were talking about the boats and where they were storing the boats, and they've changed the operation. And then we were told they were getting people paying them to go up the motorway to Germany as well. So that's always going to change, and organised crime is always going to be difficult for you to combat. So I'd be interested to know from both of you, once Rob has spoken, what do you think is the most effective way, and are you really reliant on France, is what you're saying here?
So, I mean, I think perhaps I'll let Rob talk about the organised crime, but I do want to talk about France, because I think it's really important that the panel understands the work we are doing with France and the relationship.
So thank you. So your point around if you just apply pressure in one area, that the OCGs will adapt and then they will work around that problem is exactly the point. And so we have moved over the last year to broaden our effort against to produce concurrent effort in numerous areas. So whereas traditionally you would just pursue the people that are involved in facilitation, who are committing the offences to bring people illegally to the UK, we've looked at the business model and developed that thinking to create 5 main lines of effort, which we think are the ingredients where wherever you move, you're going to encounter law enforcement and you're going to encounter pressure. And to summarise those, one of them is illicit finance and the way that the Hawaladah system works for payments to move across and through the value chain. That's both migrants and equipment supply. The other one is social media, which plays a massive part in this. Since 2021, we've taken down 23,000 accounts. That is just whack-a-mole. We actually need to deal with the people behind those accounts, and that is something that we have begun to do at scale. The supply of equipment and engines is a really important point, because much of what we're tackling here isn't unlawful to possess. So if you are tackling a shipment of drugs, you can seize it. If you are trying to interdict a shipment of equipment, you need to show it's linked to the criminality in a conspiracy. Otherwise, you've got no powers of seizure. Although some of this equipment is in breach of safety regulations, and there's more work to do, I think, in terms of criminalising the bespoke equipment which is used in these crossings. There's other parallels for this, where on the Iberian Peninsula, in terms of drug trafficking, go-fast vessels which have 4 300 horsepower engines, specialist hulls. Law enforcement pursues them with a regime that regulates them, and ultimately people involved in their supply can be guilty of criminal offences. That type of approach around equipment is something that we need to look at with bespoke equipment, because the large vessels we see from 8 metres to 12 metres that are made out of substandard material are only made for this. There is no legitimate purpose for these. Yeah. So in addition to the finance, the equipment, which also includes engines and improvised life jackets, which are substandard and dangerous, we also look at the people that are involved in moving large numbers of migrants. So our Operation Wire Worker is an example of that, of an individual in the UK who was moving thousands of people from Libya into Italy. By taking that individual out, we saw a reduction in those flows in terms of general maritime.
Does someone fill his place, though?
So of course, people will fill their place, but it takes time. But my point is that if you just do that, then somebody can take their place and you don't sustain the effort. If you sustain the effort against all of those lines of effort and they're resourced in the right way, you'll begin to have impact. And finally, and this will probably link in what Martin's going to say about France, the people that are in northern France, who are largely Iraqi Kurds, some Afghans, some Syrians, who are the people that do deals with people that want to travel, if you like, the fixers at the last stage of the journey. We're doing much more to provide as much intelligence as we can to the French on those individuals. But of course we are reliant upon a judicialised response in France for those people to be arrested. But what we can do with the capabilities we have and are now available to us is produce more and more information for the intelligence to work jointly with the French. And we have a joint unit in France which has been working on this since 2021, which has resulted in the dismantling of 54 organised crime groups and 300 arrests. But that package needs to be deployed. It isn't just one thing. And when you're under pressure with a problem like this and a chronic threat like this, the temptation is to look for the one thing that will be the silver bullet that stops this. And our experience over the last 3 years is clearly there isn't just one thing, and you need to keep applying that pressure, particularly with the organised crime.
Yeah. So clearly, as you point out, the relationship and working with France is absolutely key. Every one of these migrants is getting on the boat in France. So we have very strong working relationships with the French. The committee will be aware that the so-called Sandhurst funding programme over the sort of 3 year of funding that is currently in play. That funding period ends at the end of March next year. So I am leading in terms of the negotiation and the working that we are doing with France to see what goes forward. And obviously the profile that's there at the moment is the one that I inherited. The real focus for me is getting using any money that we are giving to France to be absolutely pointed at the things that are going to make the biggest operational difference to what is happening. And in the last year, been working really closely with France and being really challenging with France to step up the level of ambition in terms of where and how we are intervening on with the smugglers. It is a reality, I think, and certainly my perception of the reality is that once the smugglers have actually arrived on a beach, it becomes very difficult. It becomes very difficult for the law enforcement officers there to be doing much there. And you are talking about large numbers, particularly on days where the smugglers are really trying to push lots of people. And there is a significant level of violence that's being offered to the French law enforcement officers on the beaches. And again, I think that was another phenomenon that has emerged out of the different profile of the migrants that are coming across. And certainly last year, I think in the calendar year last year, it was 60 plus French officers were injured, and some quite seriously injured in the sort of levels of violence that have been overtaking there. But it's really very much for us to make sure that we've got the right kind of assets on the beach to do the work they are doing. It's also pulling away from the beach, and they do some good work in relation to kind of the points getting close to the beach, so railway junctions, road junctions, doing a lot of work there. Bringing a number of, we've funded as part of the third year of the existing Sandhurst, because we've been able during the third year to reallocate some of the money. An asset or a group called the Compagnie de Marche, which is effectively a mixed group of law enforcement that are brought together, and they operate for a period of time up in the north, and they're very proactive, and they are achieving many more kind of interventions. There is another group which, in my old policing world, I would have described as sort of a crime squad team, who are really helping us in terms of intervening, in terms of where we know there's equipment moving around, and going to get close to where the final facilitators. So really keen to support those. We do a lot with them in terms of technology to help them. So drones, some of the technology to use in and around northern France, but also the drones and the other surveillance technology, working with them in relation to that. And there's probably two items that I think are particularly worth mentioning. In relation to the taxi boat tactic, one of the things that we have got, and France have gone through a process of refining and developing new maritime tactics, which are tactics that they can use on the water to intervene with vessels before the boats can get going, because clearly once they're in the water it's very difficult for land-based officers. So they have worked through the process to create a new maritime doctrine in France, and we await that being deployed. And my understanding is that should be, they're having to work through various legal processes to ensure that the officers that are undertaking that are properly covered. Because as you will understand, any activity in the water is incredibly dangerous, and we're all familiar with the examples previously where there's been numbers of fatalities. So we're working very closely with them in relation to that. And then I guess the other specific French element is the UK-France agreement and the kind of one in, one out agreement, which is the pilot, which is in its very early stages at the moment. But again, I think that's a really important development with kind of colleagues from France.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've got some questions on one in, one out, etc. coming up later, so we will get on to that. I'm conscious of time, and I think we've got quite a lot to get through. So if we can, perhaps more briefer answers
yes,
would be.
Of course.
Thank you, Chris Murray.
Thanks, Chair. Just picking up on one thing you said there earlier in your answer, you said that earlier this year, as the smuggling gangs had lost a grip on the sort of supply chain, if you like, the pipeline, has led to an increase in fatalities. Does that mean, as you start getting more of a grip in disrupting the smugglers, we should expect an increase in fatalities?
Well, go on, you go.
So it wasn't the supply chain of equipment. Yeah. This is the migrants that were storming vessels. So this is the people and their behaviour on the beach, which was violent, uncontrolled and unstructured because they weren't paying. They were basically turning up, hiding, and then mobbing those boats as they were launching. And that resulted in crush injuries. The vulnerable on those vessels, which typically women and children, were being injured. And it is that which drove those fatalities and the overloading of those boats. What has now happened, we think, is that the crime groups that are involved in that, rather than get no money from these people, a cheaper rate and a controlled loading of these people that are going to try and potentially scupper your enterprise through uncontrolled loading of those boats. Some money's better than none. And like in 2022, when we had a lot of Albanians, which drove the numbers right up, what has happened this year is the Horn of Africa cohort, if you like, through their violent behaviour and through then an accommodation with the smugglers, have driven those numbers up, and that's what we're talking about in terms of injuries and fatalities.
Thank you. Just returning to that point about France, I've got a couple of questions on this. So there's the French Maritime Review, which you've alluded to. How have you contributed to that? And obviously there's been a bit of political instability in France recently. How is that political instability affecting the Maritime Review? And if it doesn't go ahead, what are the implications of that for your objectives?
Yes, thank you. So we've been involved working with the French throughout the process that they've undertaken that review. The governance arrangements in France are quite different to ours. Although most of the work that I do is with the Ministry of Interior in France, and the Ministry of Interior are responsible for everyone on the land, they also have a different setup which deals with anything to do with the sea. So they have a Secretary General for the sea, who is a senior general, and he is the person ultimately who has the responsibility around that. So we've been working very closely with him and his team as they've developed. Clearly, it's their process that they are working through. I was over and met with him in Paris 3 weeks ago to really press the point about how significant delivering this maritime tactic is for us because of the taxi boat scenario, and this was referred to by President Macron at the summit in July when he spoke with the Prime Minister. So it is frustrating that it's taken the time that it has. Your point about the political instability, clearly that has been a backdrop. What I would say is my relationships and my interlocutors within, whether it's in the SG Mail, the SG Mayor himself, but also within the Ministry of Interior, have remained and remain very strong. In fact, this very afternoon I'm planned to meet with my counterpart from over there. Clearly, and you will again have picked up, we had, or the Home Secretary, the previous and current Home Secretary, had both established good relationships with the Interior Minister, as was. He is not in the new government. There is a new Interior Minister, and obviously I've had, the Home Sec, I'm sure there will be a plan to do that. But my point would be, despite all of that, the close working has continued, and I'm fairly confident that we are able to intervene and influence where it is appropriate for us to do so.
Okay, thank you. We've heard about the joint upstream working group with the French, and I mean this is the same question as I had earlier. So I was a Home Affairs attaché at the Paris Embassy for 4 years.
Oh, right.
But this doesn't sound new to me. I mean, is this just what we did with the lorries, but replace the word lorry with boat? Is this a new innovation at all?
What it was and how it worked back then, I don't know. I'm not familiar with that. I don't think the concept of working upstream is a new innovation. When I took the job over, there had been an upstream working group in place, and what I was told was that the upstream working group was operating at a relatively low level and that it wasn't something that particularly I needed to get involved with. What then happened on the French side is the Interior Minister appointed a very senior figure who's had a long history, senior political figure in France, to basically lead on upstream working in France. And that then changed my decision, and I decided that I felt that if there was that kind of heft on the French side, then it was actually worth going. So I then went and we held the first renewed meeting in Paris with this is a man called Patrick Stefanini, and I went over, and Patrick Stefanini and I have co-chaired that subsequently. And what that is bringing together is looking at the kind of route-based approach that I have adopted, and likewise the French the same, really bringing both sides together, understanding very clearly what we are doing and what we're not doing in each of those areas, and equally where we can do things together. One of the things we are doing in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, in Albania, and in Vietnam is deterrent comms, communications to counter the narrative that the smugglers are providing. And we're now in a process where we're actually doing some of those jointly with the French as well, and the French have put money in to allow us to do that. So I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a completely new innovation. I think the energy that has been put into it, the structure that it's got, the clarity of the plan that we are trying to deliver, I would say is very different to where it was.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So it's having operational outputs.
Yes.
So next question is, what do the French ask of the UK? There's been a number of announcements that have come out of the government recently, things like ID cards, things like changing refugees' family reunification rights. Are those things the French are asking us, saying this is a pull factor? And is that where these ideas come from? What do they ask us?
So I think those ideas, in and of themselves, there are advantages to those, but there is no doubt in every country that I've been to since I took this job over, and definitely it is a narrative in France, is the narrative around the pull factors. It's the narrative that there are things about the UK that are causing the migrants particularly to want to try and come to the UK. Now you will all be aware that the number of asylum seekers in most in our major European neighbours are actually higher than the numbers in the UK, but nonetheless all will talk about as you describe, and they would describe the pull factors to the UK. So I think there is a whole range of work that's being undertaken within, primarily but not exclusively within the Home Office, to really identify ways that can be addressed.
We're going to come on to more on the pull factors later again.
And just one final question on that point is, do the French, one of the consequences of Brexit is we're no longer in the Dublin system. We've been to meet asylum seekers in asylum accommodation here who tell us that they understood that we're not in the Dublin system and they can't be returned through it, and that was part of their decision making. Do the French government say that to us as well? What's their perspective on us no longer being in Dublin?
I think there's no question that the lack of an ability where there was a lack of ability to return is a factor, so people would say that.
Belle Riviera Addy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to yourselves too. I want to ask some more questions about the one in, one out treaty with France that you had started explaining about. Could you explain what your role is in the deal and what lessons you're learning from the one in and one out?
So this was something that I've been part of the sort of designing as the idea first emerged, and it really very much was, I guess, getting to that point about the ability to actually have people able to move people back to France. So was involved in those processes. One of my other the way that we've decided to manage that. One of my other colleagues within the Home Office, one of the other Director Generals who leads on the sort of broader migration, has been kind of leading, and the way that we will work this through is once the pilot is up and running effectively, then that will then come across, and the sort of management and ownership of that as it moves forward will sit with me. But we've worked through, and the concept very much was twofold, really. One being it is providing a situation where an asylum seeker or someone who arrives who is inadmissible can be returned to France. And that has not been a situation that has existed thus far. And the other element to that is the fact that what it also does is it opens up a safe and legal route for people who are trying to come over to the UK. So there is where you ended up with the concept of the sort of one in, one out.
Can you explain how it opens up a safe and legal route?
Because someone who is in France, so we have worked at publicising the fact that this treaty exists and that route exists, and therefore somebody who is in France has the ability to apply to be part of that route and to come through the process legally. They would then go to the visa centre in Paris. What it also gives, really importantly from our perspective, is it is allowing people to come in that we are able to check before they are coming into the country, and they would then come through and then work through the system once they've arrived in the country. So it opens up a route to say to people that, you know, the option that you should not take is the option which is incredibly dangerous, that you go and put your hands yourself into the hands of a smuggler and you go on a small boat.
What criteria would they have to meet? And do you not envisage any problems with them having to go back to go to Paris, given the situation that they're in? Because presumably at this stage they're in Calais.
Not necessarily. I mean, as long as they are in France. I mean, the system has been very clear to make sure that this is people that are in France. But we will then go through. So they have to be documented individuals as well. So they have documents to prove their identity, and then we work them through a range of the security checks to make sure that we understand precisely who they are.
Okay. And how effective a deterrent do you expect the deal overall to be, and what level and scale of returns would have to happen for you to see that it had a significant enough impact?
Yeah, so I think the really important point is this at the moment is a pilot. It's a pilot scheme. It is very new, and we're obviously working through, along with France, making this work and make it work as effectively as we can, and then equally making sure that it is publicised and people understand. I think it is really important, to make it clear that there is a safe and legal route that avoids you getting onto a boat. But equally importantly, it is really important to send the message that if you come over on a boat illegally, there is the jeopardy that you may well be detained at that stage, taken to an immigration removal centre and removed back to France. And I think that is a really important message to be able to get across. And we have not been in that situation previously. So we've got to get the system working and work it through and get it up and running. And then I think then be in a position to scale the system up. But the reality, and I know I've said it a number of times, but it is a really important point, I think, is that there is no one thing that is going to fundamentally stop the situation that we face happening. We've got to be doing all of those things, and I think this is a really important addition to all the other things that we are doing, and as we scale it up, I think will become ever more important as an addition.
Okay.
Is it right that we're advertising in France that you can apply for this route?
Yes.
Where are we advertising?
So it's it's on gov.uk, but clearly, but it's also pushing it out through working with France as well, pushing it out, using NGOs and others that are working up in France with the migrants. So there's been a kind of comms campaign that has been and is continuing to develop to just make sure that we are able to get the message out there. Because look, I think we all know the way that the smugglers do what they do is largely through social media channels, and very open social media channels in many respects. So it's not particularly covert. So we're also just looking, and there's a comms plan to look at all the ways that we can make sure that message is getting out there to people. And then it's also using the comms opportunity for those people that are coming over to the UK. There's comms opportunity there, because so much of this is getting the message out through the sort of communities, that people will understand that you've got this opportunity to come across legally, but equally there is the jeopardy that you might end up being pushed back if you come over illegally, and it's really just another tool to try and stop people taking the decision to get in the boats.
So when people apply for this safe and legal route, and which is interesting because both the former Home Secretary and the Prime Minister both rejected the idea of safe and legal routes when we put it to them previously, but are we processing their asylum claim in France and are confident when they come to the UK that they are granted asylum, or are we waiting till they get to the UK and then there's a possibility they won't be granted asylum?
Yeah, then it's not being granted in France. The process that will take place in France is the process to ensure that we've done the relevant security checks to then bring them over. Then when they come over, they will go into the situation of the application process there.
They'll go into asylum accommodation.
Yeah, and they'll go into an application process there. But of course, by the fact that we've done what we've done on the France end, you would imagine puts you into a position where there is a much higher likelihood.
There is still a possibility that they will have their asylum claim rejected.
I think that still remains as a possibility. Yeah.
Okay, and the ones that are returned to France, what do France do with them then? Could they just get back on another boat and come over again?
No, I mean I think France. I'm just trying to identify the particular area. I probably will need to come back to you precisely on what I don't want to speak on behalf of the French, to be fair. So I think I'll come back, but we can certainly come back and give real clarity on that.
A risk. I mean, so these are people who we've not done any checks on. Presumably, we just send them straight back to France. They could just get on another boat and be back over before we knew it.
Well, we will have processed them at this end when they first arrived, right. And we will clearly know then that they have been removed back to France, and everybody that arrives on a small boat is processed, so that would be identified very quickly at that stage.
Okay. And final question from me on this. So we understand that there were 1,000 people at the Home Office working on the Rwanda scheme before it was scrapped, but there are only 12 working on the one in, one out. Is that enough?
I think I mean, they're very different schemes. I mean, I was not obviously around at the time of the Rwanda scheme, but very different schemes. But there are the 12 people are the people that are permanently, this is what they are doing. But clearly, actually making this system work involves all of the people that are working when we receive people at Dover and at Manston, all of our returns, our immigration enforcement staff that return people, all of our people that work over in visas and passports over in France. So that number is the people, the core group that are, if you like, pulling that thing together and pulling the operation together. There are a whole host of other people that clearly are working directly in actually making it happen.
Thank you. I'll come back to you, Belle, but Paul Kohler and then Chris Murray.
Just a very quick question. This small number who might get sent straight back, what criteria are applied as to who you pick from the vast numbers who aren't going to be sent back?
One second. I mean, sorry. I'll come back to that. I'll come back to that when I can just find the point on there.
There are criteria there.
Yeah, of course there are. Yeah, there are criteria as we decide which days we are going to open up a day when we know there are crossings, because there are number constraints that we have to manage with, and so we work that through, and then there will be criteria that are set at this end when people come in.
You'll tell us about later.
Yeah, I'm sure we can. Yeah, we can find that out.
I'm trying to get the theory behind it, because this has been pitched to Parliament and the public as disrupting and changing the sort of business model of the smugglers. But what you're saying to us is different streams of migrants from different parts of the country, from different parts of the world, are presenting in Calais. So isn't it the case that if we say, OK, we're going to take some from France on a safe and legal route, and and it's people who may have family connections to the UK, or it's people who pass all our tests. Anyone who's not in that category, who doesn't meet that, has no incentive to apply for the safe and legal route. They can risk the small boats. So isn't it just about, how does it completely disrupt the smugglers' business model, rather than just getting them to look at new markets? Because you're telling us that kind of new markets of illegal migrants keep cropping up in Cali as the patterns change.
I mean, just a brief point on the people that do cross. Unfortunately now, people who potentially could qualify for that are getting small boats crossings. So we have seen throughout this, as it's grown, families who have paid significant amounts of money to do that. So for those individuals, obviously, it does disempower the smugglers, because they're not going to pay if they go this route. So it's not quite as simple as that. These cohorts are so unpredictable. There is a crossover between the type of people that could be in the current one-for-one deal and the people that are on small boats. Yeah. And the only observation I would make is that in the last 5 years, this is the first time we've had anybody that's arrived on a small boat sent back. And every time that happens, from where I sit, that's positive.
Sends a message.
Because that is money that's been lost, that's money they won't get back. And, this is obviously a trial, and you can't speak to how this would scale up yet. But it's just that those two brief points in terms of the relevance to the business model. Anybody that goes back is a good thing and a bad thing for smugglers.
By that you mean going back to France?
We've returned
people to and return agreements.
Because we'd been unable to achieve that over the last several years.
And is it the case that anybody, just that example you used, anybody who comes over in a small boat who would have been eligible for this legitimate scheme, if they do that, they invalidate their possibility of staying here and they become eligible to be returned, even though they could have come?
Yes.
Okay.
Completely, yeah.
Paul, you wanted to come back on.
It only disrupts the business model if they don't know how to go back on a boat again. And presumably all the smugglers say is, well, if that happens to you, don't worry, it'll give you a free trip next time.
There's no evidence of a free trip.
That's what they'll do, though.
Why would they do that?
Because they don't want you disrupting the business model.
There's no evidence.
No.
There's no evidence or intelligence
though.
that people will say you get a free trip.
It's only just started.
Sure, but there's no evidence of that.
That's what will happen, surely.
That wouldn't make so people involved in organised crime aren't altruistic. They don't do things for free, they do it for profit.
They don't want you disrupting the business model.
Sure, but there is no evidence that will happen.
It's only just started.
Mel, back to you.
Yeah, I at the moment it sounds like there is no criteria. I mean, one of the major issues is that there hasn't been any parliamentary scrutiny, so we couldn't have asked these questions before this was put into place. At the moment it sounds like it's not clear what the criteria is for people who are sent back. It's not clear that there was a safe and legal route, or what the criteria is to enter this so-called safe and legal route, or whether or not we would consider it a safe and legal route. So with the Chair's permission, could we please ask for more detail on this, like a full written, I suppose, detail as to what exactly the scheme is, and in terms of who can apply, what checks are required, because it even seems a bit complex. So it's just identity checks, but then presumably somebody can't enter the country without a visa, because that's not how we operate on our borders. And the only way they do enter without a visa is if they're doing something like a small boat crossing. So how do you check that? At the moment, it all seems very, very unclear. And I'll go back to
we can provide that.
Yeah, if you could, I think that'd be very helpful. But I'll go back to the parliamentary scrutiny. Because you have talked about being accountable to Parliament. I think that's important. And the treaty wasn't subject to parliamentary scrutiny at all. And do you think it was the right decision to bypass Parliament to secure this agreement?
I think the treaty is very important. It's an important step change in terms of our arrangements with France, and as I've said, the potential to return someone who is inadmissible. So I think it is an important.
And I think that's probably a question for ministers as well.
Thank you.
It's currently under legal challenge in France, the treaty. Do you think it should be suspended while legal proceedings are ongoing? Does that affect your work in any way?
I don't obviously know the details of the legal challenge in France, and that would be a matter for France to deal with. But certainly, I think it's we are carrying on, and we will carry on as we are, unless the legal challenge changes that.
Okay, and since the treaty came into place, we've seen 26 asylum seekers sent back to France. One has left France soon after arriving, and they don't know where this individual is.
Right.
Are you particularly concerned about incidences like this, and what provisions have been made to ensure that something like that isn't a common occurrence?
In terms of not knowing where that individual is?
Yeah, or in terms of people being returned, and you know, as my colleagues have said,
yes,
potentially just coming back again.
Yeah, the coming back again, as I've said, everybody who, if they were to come over on a small boat or by any other we will be checking them. So therefore, if someone is someone that we have returned, then clearly that would become apparent very, very quickly. So,
can we return them again? Would they would you just return them again, or are we? I mean, there's a limited number that can be returned.
Right. Yeah, we'll have to provide that, I think, as part of the answer to you, because I'm not sure. That's not a particular circumstance we looked at.
It's early days, we know. So
it is very early days.
Going through the
and I do think we do. It is very early days, and the fact that we are, for the first time, in a place where someone who is inadmissible can be returned to France, and the fact that we are in a place where there is an ability to offer somebody an opportunity to avoid going into a small boat, then I do think that is a positive place. But it is very early stages in the pilot.
And I want to ask some questions about the border security, asylum and immigration bill, and how it might affect your day-to-day work moving forward. Do you see what you're able to do day-to-day and its effectiveness changing once the bill comes into force?
Thank you. So the bill has kind of four kind of pillars to it. I think the first one we covered off a little bit at the beginning. Obviously, the sort of statutory position for my role does give that, as I said at the beginning, I think that I've had pretty good cooperation and working with all parts of government and the other agencies, but it clearly makes that clearer. And in terms of the sort of due regard element, I think the important point about the bill as well is it allows me to set the priorities for border security, and then to conduct an annual review and bring that review to Parliament on that. So I think those are, in a very sort of personal sense to my role, quite critical. There are some data sharing powers in there which I think are less directly related to the sort of the small boats area, and some broader immigration and asylum measures that are kind of tidying up some other elements. That really, for me, the key is the border security measures, which I think will have a transformational effect in terms of how we can deliver or deal with the organised immigration crime. And I know it's been kind of put in these sort of terms, but described as sort of counter-terrorism type measures. But the real concept of the measures is a range of OIC crimes that we don't currently have, and an ability, therefore, to take both better investigative activity, but also, importantly, earlier investigative activity. So it's about much greater understanding around intelligence, and then a capability to take action. And it may be, perhaps Rob might want to talk particularly about the crime, because it will be not exclusively but largely an NCA kind of lead on some of those.
Yeah. Thank you. So at the moment, we are limited to what we have in the Immigration Act in terms of Section 25 and Section 24, unless we can identify money laundering or other offences in terms of building a case. What this gives us the opportunity to do is where people are on social media or involved in procuring equipment or advertising services, we gather intelligence on that, we can gather evidence on it. That allows us to move to an earlier executive action where ultimately it may have taken us many months or even years to prove the predicate offence of facilitation under Section 25. These new offences give us an earlier opportunity to intervene and be disruptive. And that's really the approach that CT has taken in terms of dual-use items or people who are in the build-up to attack planning. So if you hold on to that methodology, this is acting before the facilitation offences has happened to prevent crossings and prevent the risk to life and everything that goes with it. So we welcome it. We welcome the passage of the bill and royal assent whenever that happens, and we will go from there. And we are looking very hard at our current holdings of intelligence and evidence to see how we will use it when it lands.
And specifically on the offence of criminalising via social media posts, how do you see that policed? Is it going to be on the social media companies to report the posts, or are the police going to be expected to track the posts and investigate?
Yes, thank you. So there's two elements to this. The social media companies have some responsibilities under the Online Safety Act around material. This is really about us being able to identify individuals that are behind the accounts and pursue them. And that is the element that is new following the recent amendment, and we welcome that.
But is that on the police to specifically track and prosecute
Yes.
offences, or will it be a different department?
No, that's for law enforcement, for the police and the NCA to identify those individuals and pursue them.
Thank you. And when do you plan to publish your first strategic priorities document and your first annual report?
So once the bill attains royal assent, and my ambition is to produce the first report at the very early in the new financial year, is the plan.
Thank you very much.
So it's clear that you see the one in, one out and returns arrangements as a deterrent. That is a deterrent. But what more do you need in terms of legislative support and policy support for those individuals who've crossed on a small boat, who've come from a country which it's not safe to return people to? However, then they are not asylum seekers. They're not granted asylum. But what do we do with them? Where do they go?
I mean, that is one of the real challenges, I think, with the situation. And as you say, particularly when you look at the top country lists that that are coming over, and if they are not granted asylum. Now, many of those countries will be places where the level of the grant rate will possibly be a bit higher, but we do have the issue that now we have increased the number of returns. There's been quite a significant increase in the number of returns, but one of the real challenges that we have is there are some countries where it is incredibly difficult to return people to, and so there's a whole host of work going on in within other parts of the Home Office to work through how we are able to gain new returns agreements. So for one example that is since I've been in the role, I think it was probably a month or two ago that we signed the returns agreement with the Republic of Iraq. Minister Jarvis signed that meeting and that returns agreement, and that's really key for us. And then it is around how we work through. It's why the sort of route-based approach also picks into source countries as well, because the work that we need to be doing internationally with those countries is identifying those ways in which we can work not only with that country, with other European countries in that, and with other sort of international or European organisations to try and work through, because this is a challenge that we all face. And this was loud and clear yesterday with all the interior ministers from the Balkan regions, where actually the Balkan region has done really well at reducing the number of migrants that are coming through. There's been some great operational work done between the countries and with Frontex and with us, and we've provided, asset and capability and training. But one of the challenges that those ministers yesterday and the police chiefs last week were really pushing was, that's great, but how do we remove people? So there is a lot of work going on with that, but it is essentially one of the biggest challenges, I think, for the whole area is how we find a situation to move people on.
I think it would be very helpful if the UN or another international agency developed a model returns treaty that could be easily... we have model double tax treaties, we could have a model returns treaty.
Precisely. And I think, at the very least also with European partners as well. I mean, and I know, there's been a whole host of work ongoing in terms of the work with the EU, but because in all of the EU countries where I've met with either other senior officials or with law enforcement, everyone has the same challenge and the same issues, and the more that we can work collectively, and I think you're absolutely right, what you ideally would want would be an umbrella agreement that comes across and allows everyone to play into that, because it is, it's very challenging when you've got individual that's why I'm, the upstream working, the question that Mr. Murray asked, it is important, because I think the more that we can do jointly, and we're doing lots of joint work with France, we're doing lots of joint work with Italy, we've got a joint action plan that we're working with Germany. There is lots of activity going on, but often bilateral and on occasion trilateral. But we really, I think, this problem is a global and definitely a European issue, and I think how we can try and find the sustainable solutions needs to be done collectively.
Thank you. Margaret Mullane.
Yeah, my question's about agency working together. So you've said a lot this morning about that.
Yes.
So my question is around, on the small boat crossings, how much of a priority is it for all the departments, all the agencies, and is there any duplication of work, and how high on their list is this, the small boats really?
So that is a really good question, and was, as you might imagine, one of the first questions that I was asking when I came in. What I would say, and I think it also goes to answer the questions at the very early part of the session, is I think Border Security Command coming in and my role coming in has made a significant difference to that. Particularly, I would say the working with the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, which is obviously key in terms of all of the international working that we are doing. I think we're in a very different space in terms of how prioritised dealing with illegal migration is across all of those departments. I know how high it is now in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and of course the fact that the former Home Secretary is now the Foreign Secretary, and she was, obviously leading on all of this in the Home Office. I think that is in a different space in terms of where we are, and I would reference again the stocktake processes that both at the Cabinet Secretary level for officials and the Prime Ministerial level for politicians around all of this has placed a real emphasis. I don't think that the Home Sec, the Foreign Sec, and definitely the Prime Minister could be any clearer on the prioritisation and the expectation there is. So I'm really encouraged by how that has improved.
Yeah, I mean, I have no doubt with the Prime Minister and the people you've mentioned today, but with the actual departments, how would you measure that really on the priorities? Like at the very top, you're quoting the Home Secretary,
yes,
Foreign
yes,
Secretary,
yes.
but actually at department level, how high up is the small boat crossings for them?
Yeah, well, certainly in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, it is very high up, and they are in the process, as we speak, of reorganising to have a much stronger migration-focused team. It all comes back again to the sort of single integrated plan that I referred to, which is the way that I will be measuring our performance as we go forward. And that integrated plan, the elements within that plan and the things that we are measuring are not exclusively Border Security Command or Home Office. They are cross-government. There will be different parts of government that are delivering against that. The other place that I bring all of that together departmentally is when I have the Director General level individuals from all of those government departments coming into my system leadership board. And certainly once the Act has achieved royal assent, then formally at that point I will set the priorities for the border security system, which clearly will be focused around OIC in this instance, and that then will be the other mechanism by which I'll be able to measure the level of accountability and the results that are delivered.
Do you think it would need to get to that point before you'd be aware of any duplications?
I think there is always a danger that there is going to be duplication, and certainly one of my objectives throughout has been to minimise that and reduce that down. I think Rob made the point earlier that when something becomes a priority, lots of people want to demonstrate they're doing something about it, and the danger is that you actually diffuse the impact. So I think that is one of the objectives, and I genuinely think one of the advantages of creating the Border Security Command and the Border Security Commander role is that it focuses that in, and the responsibility is clearly to me to be able to make sure that we are eradicating that duplication. We're not wasting effort, and that it also takes you to where we want to rationalise lines of command around things, because we need clear accountability, and that's really key from my perspective.
Do you think, though, that there might be a danger that because the command has been set up, that some parts of the department are saying, oh, well, that's all right, that's their job now, and we're off doing our own thing?
I absolutely think that's a danger, but I genuinely don't think that is what is happening. I think everyone, or certainly from a Home Office perspective and a Home Office Migration and Borders perspective, I sit there on the executive committee of the Home Office, and there is no question that the others sitting around that table all understand the priority that this has. It's very clear from the ministers. But you're absolutely right. I think it's always that challenge, isn't it? Do you create a specialist team, or do you require everybody to do this? I think what we are doing is both of those things. We are requiring everybody to recognise that this is one of the very highest political priorities for the country, and at the same time we are also creating this role and this organisation that has the responsibility to hold you to account for what you are doing, and that I see very much as part of my role, is to make sure that everybody else recognises that place where they can make a contribution to that overall effort, and that the whole kind of full spectrum of the things that we need to do if we're going to move this situation forward quickly. I'm
thinking back to my time as a minister. If I had this as a priority on every submission, what role is this playing in reducing small boat crossings? Then that would be something that would focus the minds. Do you think anything like that is happening? Are ministers insisting that this is being front and foremost on everybody's minds?
I think, certainly in the Home Office, there is no doubt that this is at the front and foremost, and I think definitely in the Foreign Office as well. Now, whether that goes for others who are, I guess, less directly in a position, but again, I don't think there is a lack of clarity about just how high the level of importance that this issue has. I think through the way that we are operating, we are being very clear with people the full range of things that we need everybody where everybody can play in. Because for some government departments, for example, it's not so much that they can do something that is going to put pressure into a scenario. It may be they can do something that can be part of the quid pro quo with another country, where I'm trying to get a country to take action in one way. And certainly in all of the agreements that I've been involved in, we've gone saying it would be really helpful if you can do X or Y. And then the natural and quite right, the expectation is, well, what is it that the UK can do that is of an interest? And the UK-Germany action plan is a really good example of that, where there were things that we were able to do both sides. And one of the consequences of that action plan is that in the very near future, there will be a change of legislation in Germany that will open up all sorts of opportunities for us in terms of equipment, law enforcement around equipment. So for me, I think it is very much in the minds of everybody, but it's very much my responsibility at that official level to make sure that is very clear to my counterparts in all of those departments.
And of course there is also the possibility that another government department does increases the pull factor, and on that on that point I should turn to Paul Kohler.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hewitt. There's a plethora of push and pull factors.
There are.
The Border Security Command obviously has no control over the push factors. I can't see it has much control on any of the pull factors either. So how can you smash the gangs if there's a demand? Won't criminality always fulfil that demand and find ways to fulfil that demand? And are you therefore is it just not a fool's errand?
No, I don't think it's a fool's errand. The point there is undermining. We need to undermine that business model, and so there are a number of law enforcement actions that Rob has described, the kind of range of the 5 lines of effort that we can make it much harder. Your point is absolute, and I have spent years working in serious organised criminality, and I couldn't have summarised it any better than say, where there is a demand, there will be some criminals who will find a way to service that demand. So we need to be pushing incredibly hard in all of those 5 lines of effort that the NCA primarily, but not exclusively, are tackling. The push factors are, I will just touch very briefly on the push factors, because we, as part of the intelligence work and the assessment work that I have commissioned, we have a pretty clear understanding of the actual reasons and the drivers that are happening in a lot of the countries for the reasons that people are coming over, the ones that are arriving by small boat. And a large part of what we're doing internationally is about trying, where we can, to deal with some of those. But we can't stop conflict and we can't stop repressive regimes. But we can absolutely understand it. We can do what we can do to support where we can local leadership and other organisations. On the pull factors, we need to be frank. There are pull factors that no one can control. The English language is a pull factor for some groups that are attempting to, or that will come over. And there is also the diaspora community issue again, which is true. And this is a phenomenon that is familiar in all the other European countries as well. What we absolutely have to do, I think, is ensure that there is as little as possible in our systems and our asylum systems that is making this particular place more attractive for someone than somewhere else. And the chair has already referred to some of the various bits of work that are going on in other parts within the Home Office that I have the ability to kind of intervene into or influence into, to really make sure that we are doing everything that we can, that is not something that is pulling people over, and just working our way through that. And then it is those range of other things. And I do think accepting it's very new, the pilot scheme is another element that I think will play into that.
On those sort of schemes being employed or considered, what assessment have you done on the role of mandatory digital IDs?
So I haven't personally done any direct. I mean, that is a bit of work that again is being picked up elsewhere within the Home Office, but clearly I've been involved in the discussions and the sessions there. There is no doubt that having an ability to make it significantly harder for somebody to work illegally is absolutely key. The other factor that I probably should have mentioned immediately around the pull factors is the element, and I've referred a couple of times to task forces that I'm talking about internationally, but we have also created the UK domestic OIC task force, which works in this country and is a combination of National Crime Agency, policing, immigration enforcement, HMRC, DWP, and all the range of government agencies. And that is all about the domestic OIC task force is all about bearing down on illegal working, on those that are illegally in the country, bearing down on where we know that there are illicit finance elements to the draw that people are coming over. So all of that work is critical. We know that the right to work legislation has been strengthened up, but the concept of a digital ID that makes it even harder for somebody to be in a position to try and work, I think potentially has advantage, and I think it's going to be really important. And I know that there is a consultation process that's going to be begun to work through how that could work and add value to the work that we're doing.
Yeah, France has compulsory ID requirements. Its black economy is bigger than the UK. Its per capita number of undocumented immigrants is higher. What does that international comparison tell you?
Obviously, I don't. I have no kind of detail or particularly of the France side. I just, from my perspective, it is about doing everything that is available to be done to prevent someone feeling and someone being fed the line by a smuggler that if you get over there, you will be able to do. You'll be able to work. You'll be able to do what you want to do. So having the regulations and the capability to prevent that, and also I think very importantly, signalling very strongly that is not going to be something that's going to be acceptable, I think are positive things to do.
Should it not be evidence-based rather than this looks good? Should it not be evidence-based rather than this looks good?
And I imagine that out through the consultation process that element will emerge. There is a consultation process that's going to, but it feels that like there is a potential there that it could add value. I don't know the international comparisons specifically around digital ID or any other form of ID.
Well, let's ask my next question.
Yeah, so because we've got Chris and Margaret, but I just wanted to ask as well. So it's already illegal to employ somebody who is undocumented. I mean, surely a deterrent, a reduction in the pull factor would be some very serious and high-profile arrests and fines, yes, and employers being made to pay for this. I mean, if it's not enforced, doesn't really matter if you've got a digital ID or not. It's the enforcement surely that matters, and it's already a crime. So why is that not happening?
I agree with that. Go on, you go.
Yeah, so there's activity underway. I mean, it's a very good point. And part of the domestic task force is police, HMRC, NCA out on the ground. We've seen the first element of that, which was Organised, which got a lot of publicity because of links to barbershops. So shops which are appearing in the high street, which have got a high turnover of cash and are engaging in the grey economy, are being targeted more and more. And that is part of applying the pressure with existing legislation, because it is a point well made. It's making the most out of the current opportunity to bear down on that, and you will see more of that from the domestic task force over the next few weeks.
But there's also the risk of the vulnerable that are being exploited, that are actually victims of modern slavery.
Yes.
So, I mean, this needs to be joined up, and actually it needs to be some very high profile, big fines, big sentences, but victims also being protected.
Correct.
Chris Murray.
I just wanted to come in on the point about analysis of the pull factors. There's a lot of information out there now with with social media and with the diversity of the flows and just modern technology. And there's a lot of analysis being done of that in sort of the private sector. How much of that information threat assessment is actually getting into the Home Office and affecting in real time the decisions that you're taking? Are you confident that on immigration enforcement you've got the sophistication to do that in the way that we have in things like other kinds of organised crime and terrorism in particular?
Yeah, I would say there's a huge amount of work that, and again, it's one of the things that we have developed since the BSc coming in, is about pulling all of those opportunity or all of that information together in a way that we can use it to inform our decision making. And so we've produced a number of those assessments, and you're quite right, it's the open source. The open source intelligence is really significant as well, and that is an area where we are very much in a place of working through the process of how you do very similar as you've just described into other threat areas, because lots of this exists there in open source. And it's also so key because so much of that pull factor is the kind of narrative that's being pushed out there by the smugglers.
It sounds like you're saying you recognise it's developing. It
is developing, yeah.
And it needs to develop further.
Yeah.
And are there plans to do that?
Yeah, there are plans, and part of our overarching plan is really, and particularly picking in on the open source side as well, but working across all of the intelligence gathering capabilities that we've got to bring together the most comprehensive picture that then allows us to identify, because that feeds entirely back into how I am able to look against the plan and the range of options that we're trying to, or the things that we're delivering in the plan, what the outcome is, and therefore that links me very much back into the finance side as well, because what I need to be doing is financing those things that we are actually seeing a direct outcome. And so that process, the whirring around process of really understanding where it's having an impact, are we pushing in the right place? Because the whole, we all understand that the organised criminals will constantly adapt. They are incredibly adaptable, and we need to be able to understand that, and then we need to be adapting ourselves in terms of the tactics and where we're pushing our effort.
Margaret.
Yeah, following on from what the Chair said, I'm a firm believer that if a pull factor to the UK is it'd be quite easy to do illegal working, and let's be honest, we're not going to name them, but we'd all know who they are.
Yes.
So the enforcement. But what worries me is with the ID cards, there's a kind of narrative beginning to grow for the public that if we bring them in, that will help with the small boat crossings. And I don't know if Rob has an opinion on this. I'm sure organised crime will work a way around that as we move forward, if we do go forward with that. I just wonder what you think.
I'll go before Rob. I guess, and I've said this a number of times, but it is a really key point, and it is a really key element of the way that I approach. There is no one thing, and it's what I find quite frustrating, and it'll emerge in the media where an idea gets pushed forward, and this is the idea that's going to, it's very, very clear. This is sophisticated, long been working organised criminality that is adaptable, and you have a demand, as we've already said. So this is about looking at every opportunity that we have to have an impact and to chip away at that criminal business model. And is any one thing happening going to change that entirely? No, but it makes it harder. It's constantly making it harder. And if you are really bearing down on illegal working, and people are seeing law enforcement activity around illegal working, and people are being dealt with very visibly for that, because so much of this is about what is visibly out there in terms of people's perceptions, then that's another thing that we should be doing. So I do kind of support it, but I don't know whether Rob...
No, thank you. So we haven't seen anything yet specifically in terms of organised crime's response to these proposals. We may start to see that as the consultation gathers pace and people talk about it more. But just a general point around fixing identity and crime, that is generally a good thing, because the reason fake ID cards, the reason fake driving, all of these things exist for people to operate under a different identity to break the law. So things that double down and make it harder for that are generally a good thing in terms of tackling crime. But time will tell as the consultation develops and as people start to consider this, whether we start to get intelligence around what people think of this.
It's another opportunity for the criminals. They can have fake digital ID as well. Belle.
There are other countries in Europe that have not digital, they have physical ID cards and some digital, and they still have exactly the same issue. So what's so different and special about ours?
As I say, I mean, I'm not directly leading the bit of work that's looking directly at that, and I understand your point. It was the point that Mr. Kohler made as well about France. Again, it feels to me that having that ability to further put pressure, particularly around illegal working, seems to me to be a positive. That then has to be absolutely supported by the kind of law enforcement, and I think that is exactly what we are doing through the UK organised immigration crime task force. But I think we do need to work. It needs to work through the consultation process and look exactly at how it will develop.
I'm conscious of time. I know you've not got much longer, and we have got an inquiry on the role digital ID might play in this. So any evidence you want to submit would be gratefully received, and we'll obviously be taking evidence on this in the not so distant future. But I think if we can move on, Paul Kohler.
There's two more questions I want to ask you on. One, there's been a welter of spending announcements, and government, when all else fails, tends to reach for its chequebook and throw some money at the problem. How are you making sure that money is used strategically and judging the effects of that money spent?
So, is it worth me just talking through exactly where I am financially from the command, or I can talk about how I'm managing it?
No, I just don't broad. I want to hear how you're actually managing.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was a budget identified for Border Security Command when I came in, and as I said at the beginning, that budget was then extended to cover 24-25, and then we also had the additional 100 million from the reserve in this year. I have put together, and all of that funding is coming in for border security, and to Border Security Command or for border security. The vast majority of that funding I am then distributing out to other parts of the system, because that's where the actual delivery is taking place. So I have a team working for me within Border Security Command who are managing all the finance and the financial accountability processes, and obviously my processes then work up into the Permanent Secretary's accounting officer responsibilities in the Home Office. But the original, the core budget 175, that is 101 of that is going to NCA for capability and operations.
I don't need to know where the money's going.
Right, okay.
I want to understand how you actually determine where best to use the money and make sure you're getting value for money.
So that links precisely into my single integrated plan. The plan is identifying all of those activities that we believe are the activities that will get us to where we need to get to. The funding and the funding allocation, be it in the core 175 or the additional 100, is allocated to allow us to deliver against the actions that are in those plans. I then have the team that is working up and managing the finance from my perspective. As I say, most of that money goes out. A significant part of that goes with the NCA, and we've now developed a joint team working to manage that money. First point, so then when you manage the money, you then have to manage the outputs to ensure that you are getting what you are paying for in the money, be that technology, be that people, whatever it may be. And that stage of the process is what works within what I've just described. Then
your role. That's your role.
My role,
yeah.
And my team is managing, and I am responsible for that budget, and then ultimately up to the permanent secretary, who is responsible as the accounting officer for that budget. So that is very clear, and that is me ensuring that the money, either within the Home Office or other departments or CPS or the NCA, is accounted for, and I can see the output. The real challenge, and this is where we've done and are doing a lot of work, is taking that to the next stage, which is identifying the outcome and making sure that the money that I am allocating and what that is buying is then having an outcome at the other end. And we've been doing a considerable amount of work with the Home Office analysis and insight, the sort of statistical side within the Home Office, to really work up the methodology about how we are able to quantify in outcome terms the money that we are spending.
I see from last night's letter that you say there's some 5,000 people employed in border security system.
The overall system, that's the overall system.
Of which 1,000 are directly funded by your command. He who pays the piper, 80% of the people in the system aren't directly funded via the command. How do you actually make sure you're getting that 80% to do what you want them to do?
Well, I mean, the reality is, I don't think it's a practical way of trying to operate that only the people that I'm paying for are delivering what we need to deliver. The money that I have been given is really about allocating that to the most significant elements that will deliver against my plan. The remainder, the management of that is working through my governance arrangements as the Border Security Commander, to make sure that the various parts of the system are delivering what I need them to deliver against the sort of the taskings that I'm putting out there. So I don't think will ever would be in a position that it was purely based around directly funding. The funding that I do have needs to be targeted at those things that are the most significant, and I'm the most confident will deliver the not only the outputs but the outcome. And then the rest of the system I have to manage through my governance arrangements.
Finally, I want to return to a question I've asked Mr. Jones about in private session in the past, this smashing the gangs. Mm-hmm. We've been trying to smash the drug gangs for decades and decades and failed. And at a previous session, the Director General of the NCA said, the difference is the infancy. The infancy of the gangs makes it easier. And as I put to Mr. Jones in the past, he has said in the Times, the infancy of the gangs makes it more difficult. Can you explain that conundrum in public session and convince me this time?
So it's very simple. So I've compared the comparisons to the drugs market. There's two levels to that. First thing is the drugs market has been established for many, many years. You know, it's really the 70s that drugs exploded, and the enforcement effort began with the Misuse of Drugs Act in 1971. That involves hundreds of thousands of people internationally in many, many different countries and produces billions. The small boats problem is a subset of people smuggling. So we are not saying we will stop people smuggling, just like you are saying we haven't stopped drug smuggling and drug abuse. We are saying that the most damaging and harmful and most egregious breach of border security at the moment is small boats. That part of organised immigration crime is new. It's 5 years old. That's relatively new in terms of a crime type. Has only really become a problem since 2020. And involves a much smaller amount of people with bespoke equipment. So that, as a target for law enforcement, is very, very different from other targets. The other comment around the comparison to the drug trade, so on one level, the organised crime groups are different, but there is something that is very difficult about the small boats model, which is that most of the equipment is dual use and legal. And it's only really now, in the last 2 years, that we've been trying to criminalise that business model with new legislation. If I've got a drug consignment on the roads, I can find it, I can do surveillance on it, and anybody in possession of it or connected to it is arrestable. End of story. Small boats equipment is not like that. So when I say it's more difficult to seize small boats equipment, that's what I mean. Because we need to link that to the criminality behind it. The new measures that come through, which criminalise that business model, will make it easier for us to do it. So they're the differences. And what has been said around the immaturity of this model, this is the time to really leverage the effort across all of the areas that we've talked about to really push this back. Because the longer it goes on, we see what happens, because organised crime copies what works. For many, many years, organised crime choose to smuggle people in lorries through canalised traffic. Now, that is where we should contest this. That is the place to do it, with protective security, protection for migrants, and that's the place that it's hardest for organised crime to work. So we need to push it back in that direction and fight it there, not in the English Channel, with all the associated risk to people and the opportunities for organised crime. So that's the comparison with drugs.
We are coming to our final question, which is about international cooperation, which we've covered some of, but Chris Murray's got questions on it.
Thank you. Yeah, we've already talked a lot about the international stuff, but what I wanted to ask is, the government's been putting a lot of effort into international agreements and working with upstream partners. I want to ask firstly, how important are those to your strategic planning? How much do your plans depend on them working? And what's your assessment of how effective they've been so far?
And I think I've kind of alluded to this, but I think they're absolutely critical. This is the only way that we can deal with this situation, is to work in collaboration with other countries. There's a range of agreements. So since I have come in, the Calais group, which is France, Belgium, the Netherlands and Germany, group met December of 24, when I was relatively new in the role, and there were a range of actions and a range of activities that came out of that group, which are effective and are constantly being kind of pushed forward. I've talked about the Germany action plan, which is really key, and particularly once their legislation changes, I think will make a significant difference. And I think come to the points that were being raised in the last question. There are other international agreements around working. When I first arrived, I was in Iraq and Kurdistan with the Home Secretary, and those were broader agreements around tackling the range of serious and organised criminality, but particularly focusing in and around organised immigration crime. So all of these are really key, and I think what we see from those is and I tried to say it earlier, but you need that top level political engagement to really drive it through with the other country, which I've been absolutely getting in all occasions since in the last year. And then it's about that opens up the systems to work with the systems and to be able to deliver. I think, and I was in that world when we went through the Brexit process, but I think we did retain really good law enforcement cooperation, particularly with European partners. That is incredibly helpful for us. Also working...
Did we though? I mean, because that was going to be my next question. Some of the access to databases that we don't have anymore. We're not in Europol and Eurojust in the way that we were. The Dublin system, I mean, these are all having to be reopened, no?
Well, I'll let you, because Europol, I mean, I was over in Europol a month or two ago.
So we've got more people in Europol than we've ever had. We've increased our footprint there. We work more closely with Interpol than we ever did. So, yes, things changed after exit, but, we've recovered those relationships in terms of law enforcement. And we do more.
Are you confident that we're back to where we were on law enforcement?
So it's a constant effort to keep up with all of the systems that are in use in the EU, but we work very effectively with them, and we've mitigated the impact through a variety of methods. And one of them is through Interpol. One of them is through more people on the platform in Europol. Yeah. So certainly in those multilateral environments, we thrive, people want to work with us, and the exchange of information and joint operations and how we work together is very positive.
And just on that point, because that's so interesting to hear, but I wonder, because it's obviously international diplomacy we're talking about, not the sort of multilateral institutions that we had in the EU, do you find that what you're looking to acquire from other countries, the cooperation you're looking for, gets built into a wider political diplomatic discussion, where we're talking about other issues like fisheries or tech or other things? Do you find that what your asks are quite discreet, or do they become part of a wider international negotiation on bilateral bases?
And I think sometimes they will be discreet, but I tried to allude to this earlier. It's been quite a learning experience for me, having come from a law enforcement world where I dealt with lots internationally, but it would normally be case by case or operation by operation. You're absolutely right. This is a being in a diplomatic space, and I think actually it's been quite helpful that you are in a quid pro quo, because there are lots of things that the UK is able to do that is really beneficial for other countries. And I very much kind of adopted the approach of going in and being very clear that we need to. And where you look at the big agreements, so the agreements with France that came out of the summit with France, the agreements with between the Prime Minister and Chancellor Merz with Germany, there are a number of those where they clearly are cross-governmental, and you will bring in the other factors. So it's a mixture, really. I will always try and make use of the opportunity that's presented by those bigger set-piece opportunities. And quite frankly, there's not been a single one of those since I've been in this job where migration has not been very high on the agenda for all of those other countries that we're talking to. But where it's discreet, equally, we are able to have those kind of discreet conversations when we need something very specifically, particularly around the OIC.
Thanks. And then one final question, because I know we are pushing our time limit. What's the next stage of international agreements here? I mean, is it, if you could go to the Foreign Office with a shopping list of treaties you want them to get focused on, what countries are you looking at? What kinds of deals? What areas?
Well, I think we are. We're linked and engaged with all of the kind of key countries that we need to be engaged with. I would kind of go back to the point that I think the chair made around, working collectively with the EU, and because this is a problem that we all are, and I've met with people in all of those countries. They all face this problem to one extent or another, generally fairly significantly, but it manifests itself. So for me, it's how we can get ourselves into agreements where we're working multilaterally is really helpful. And we are doing, we're doing stuff obviously with France. I'm doing stuff with France and Kurdistan, doing stuff with France and Italy. We do the Calais group. So there are a range of ways that we're operating. But I think the more that we can get into a space where we're not doing repeated bilateral seems to me to be something that I think would be really beneficial.
Sorry, this is my final question. Do you feel that sometimes there are groups of countries operating together? I'm thinking of the EU, but it could be other ones that we're not in, that you would like to break into? I'm not trying to realistically Brexit, I'm just trying to understand other groups of countries that work together that we should be with.
Yeah, as I say, I think that Calais group we are. The ones that I was with yesterday, the Balkan region, the Balkan Six work really well, but we are very much part of that. And as I said, I was chairing one of the meetings a week ago today. So there's none immediately from my perspective. And the reason that I've kind of designed it in these route-based task forces that allows us to not just work individually with a country, but working with a group of countries that obviously have a common interest.
Thank you.
Paul Kohler has one final question.
Very quick question. Mr. Jones, you were very frank about the fact you've been mitigating the issues post-Brexit. I'm just wondering, can either of you point to any examples where Brexit has helped us control our borders, helped you do your job, helped us reduce the issue of undocumented migrants? And the answer might be you can't.
Yeah, certainly not immediately in answer to that. It wasn't something I was anticipating or thinking about in advance.
Maybe you can write to us if you can.
If I will ponder on that, and I'm very prepared to write.
I'm not surprised by that answer.
Can Can I thank you very much? I think we've just come in under the time limit that we had. We would appreciate regular updates and particularly seeing data and metrics, because we want you to succeed. We really do want to solve this problem. And I think you won't find a single person around this table or anywhere else who doesn't want this to work. So regular updates would be great, and I'm sure we will see you again soon. But on that, I will bring things to a close. Order.